Here we go.
It's not. Here we go.
Okay, welcome everyone to Living in My Shadow podcast. I'm Sandra Wallace, the OCD coach from calling in from Winnipeg, Manitoba, actually Selkirk, Manitoba in Canada. And I have an amazing guest today, Jackie Troller, all the way from Honolulu. And I just want to welcome her. I met her several months back at a mastermind in the States. And you know how you meet someone and you just connect and you feel like you can just approach them and say hi and how you doing? This was one of those people, Jackie. So thank you, Jackie, for being on today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'd like to start by just giving us a little bit of background because your background is fascinating. Tell us a little bit about where you're coming from and what you do.
So I guess my background has always been inspired by the ocean, the water, actually by fresh water. Originally, I was raised in a suburb of Chicago, but frequently visited Lake Michigan. And I guess that big body of water inspired me to become a marine scientist. Little did
Nice.
I know I am now into breath work. And it's funny because one fun little fact is that most of the oxygen in the atmosphere is produced by organisms in the ocean. So even though I went to school to study marine science, I now am involved in breath work, helping people to maximize their oxygen efficiency and really understand the incredible depth that awareness of your breathing can bring into your life.
Nice. And it's interesting because when I met you and I was speaking the language of breathing, such as box breathing, you were really quick to give me some clarity and let me know that it's more than that. So today's
Yeah.
subject is all about that. And I know as an OCD coach and many people listening, whether they're coming from the coaching perspective, professional background, and or a client-based perspective, we've all been taught up to this point till I met you, actually, to be honest, is about coping strategies. And one of them being the typical way to breathe as a form of coping. And I quickly learned that there's so much more to it and there's so much intricacies to it, physiologically and psychologically. So if you could just share, like, up to this point, we've all been breathing and we feel like we've done a good job of it. But what is it about that, what you do and teach and you're passionate about in what lies in your expertise about breathing that society doesn't really know up to this point? I'd like you to talk on that subject.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of to go along with your point, one of my most common questions is I've been breathing my whole life. So why do I need to learn how to breathe? And it's really when you don't know, you don't know. But where you start is with certain state changes. I think a lot of people who are more interested in breathing tend to be anxious and are aware of deep breathing, or a lot of people will say just breathe. It's not like a real scientific term, but I like to say emotional state changes. Trying to, if someone's anxious, a lot of people will be like, oh, they're breathing into a paper bag. A lot of people associate that. But I want everyone to know, even beyond anxiety, you can retrain your breathing, your whole breathing pump, so that you're breathing more efficiently on a daily basis. And then hopefully you can reach a state to kind of prevent those states of anxiety through breathing as you continue down your breathing journey. And I really believe that it's one of the most foundational missing components in our health and performance talks, because we talk about diet, we talk about exercise. Well, breathing can even be a gateway for people who resist exercise, because by getting your respiratory system working more optimally, people become less breathless during exercise, and it helps just break down another wall of resistance.
Interesting. So what, as a beginner, someone like myself learning, what would be the first step? Like walk us through the transition of what you do and say and educate on that field.
Yeah, and it has to come from a very foundational, you how do I say this?
Sure.
It's interesting for me in my journey where I'm at, and then where a lot of people are starting. For me, my entry was free diving. So I became a free dive instructor, and I found out I could hold my breath for 4 minutes in just 2 days. It was a 4-day class, but within 2 days, they got us to a 4-minute breath hold. And then learning that the average person is physiologically capable of a 3 to 4 minute breath hold, but then all these stresses and how we live our lives on a daily basis has greatly reduced that. I was like,
Mm.
wow, like, how are we missing living in our full capacity? Because
Mhm.
it's kind of mind blowing. Oh my gosh, we can hold our breath for 4 minutes.
Mhm.
And that portion, that's what got me into breathing. And so what I want other people to know is it's just such a cool world once you start in it. And a good place to start is like closing your mouth while walking up a hill. And it's something as simple as that. Just trying to revert to nose breathing and maybe pushing your body a little bit. Closing your mouth while walking up a hill seems ridiculously simple, but it is the
No.
greatest way you can see how your breath changes your physiology and your system, how it operates. Uh,
Right.
the first time I really thought of that exercise was 2 years ago because we lived at the top of a hill. And even though I was doing all this other breath work,
Yeah.
I wasn't closing my mouth while walking up a hill or hiking. So just by closing my mouth and walking up to the hill to my house, I could see the difference between my recovery and my boyfriend's recovery. He was still huffing and puffing minutes later, but I was totally fine. Even though I pushed through some resistance, like, oh, I want to breathe more. I feel like
Yeah.
I'm not getting enough air. Just
Mhm.
by closing my mouth and walking to the top of the hill, my recovery was like that. Even though I pushed through a little resistance, it had
Right.
more benefits
Oh,
in
cool.
the
That
end.
is neat. Yeah. And you said for 4 minutes, but fast forward now, because of what you're doing, how long is you able to hold your breath?
Right now, I'm at 5 minutes and 30 seconds.
Wow, amazing.
I would like to do some more training. Absolutely.
And what goal are you trying to reach? Do you have a goal in mind? Like what are
Ooh.
studies predict, like how long you
I
can?
would love to get 7 minutes. That's just a
Mm,
personal goal.
okay, wonderful. So as part of your, can you tell the audience a little bit about what you do currently?
Yeah. I
Mhm.
currently am training high performers, top performers to currently triathletes to decrease their performance time by a couple minutes through
Mhm.
harnessing the power of their own breath. So it's a combination of breathing retraining and then some high altitude type simulation exercises so that these guys can go from just being triathletes to Ironmen. They want to make some
Wow.
Ironman qualifiers.
Wow, that's amazing. And you've got a lot of great experience in doing that, because tell the audience what your last project was that you more recently completed.
Yes. So I've trained Red Bull athletes, big wave surfers, water rescue units, government agencies. And the latest one was I got to help out as a freedive instructor on set of the movie Avatar, The Way of Water.
Ooh, wonderful.
So that was
So
really fun.
that is amazing. Good for you. So can you tell us why, why it's important to learn this type of breathing over the old way of, or I want to call it the old method, the one that we're probably more familiar with?
Well, box breathing is great. It I think what people are missing in understanding breath work is that there's not just one fad technique. There's so many ways to breathe. And in James Nestor, he's a famous journalist who wrote about breathing. In his book Breath, he mentions a girl who says there's more ways to breathe than foods to eat, or something to that
Oh,
extent.
really? Wow, that says a lot.
And it's I might have slightly misquoted it, but it just gives you the idea that there's
Yeah,
so many different ways to breathe, and people
yes.
get so stuck on this method, this breathing method, and that breathing
Yeah.
method. But actually, it's using the variety of breathing techniques, not
Mhm.
only to achieve your goal of what state you want to be in, what emotional state do you want to be in? Do you want to go from anxious to calm? Do you
Yes,
want to go from maybe tired to energized? So
right.
there's different breathing techniques that engage different parasympathetic or sympathetic
Mhm.
responses,
Right.
and that you can go even beyond just emotional states into optimizing your breathing on a daily basis, which is more breathing retraining,
Yes.
involving how you breathe, where you breathe, and how much you breathe.
I love that breathing retraining, because you have to retrain the mind. Just like there's many breathing techniques and stages that you can do, so is the whole realm of coping techniques, right? And I always tell people, you will only know when you practice a variety of things. We don't know what's going to work for one person versus another. So I often get them
Right.
trying to practice different techniques so that they can utilize those techniques in a time of crisis or a time of urgency, or when they need those techniques to happen. But your breathing, when you spoke of it, oh, there you go. Are you there still?
Yeah, I'm still
Oh,
here.
okay.
I'm just having a little technical
No
difficulty, but we can
worries.
continue.
That's okay. Yeah, we'll carry on and we might get you back. That's a nice picture, by the way. So,
Thanks.
Jackie, when you talk about talk a little bit about what happens physiologically to our body when there you are. Hello. Talk about your body, like what's going on internally when you're doing the techniques that you're discussing.
This has been my greatest challenge explaining this. There's kind of two different techniques I use. One is a breathing retraining, which I am getting my integrative breathing therapist certification. So
Okay.
one route has gone more clinical in my studies, but
Okay.
the other route is almost more spiritual and
Mm,
connects all these cultures. And what's interesting is breathing has come and gone in waves throughout the history of humanity.
yeah.
And we're just currently in a stage where it's becoming more well known. Like it's just on the rise again of
Okay.
us being aware of the benefits of breathing. Many Native Americans incorporated breathing through closing their children's mouths as they were sleeping as a child. And the
Mm,
science is now meeting this practice with uh, bedwetting being associated with mouth breathing at night.
really?
And again, in James Nestor's book, he goes through how the face can drop if it's not foundationally supported by the mouth being closed.
Oh,
So it's interesting that these idiosyncrasies in society, like mouth breathers,
yeah. Yes.
mouth breathing so bad, it actually is negative towards people's health. So I think that's how, as a society, it became like, oh, a
Yeah.
point of making fun of people, but it's probably because it's disadvantageous to our health.
Okay.
Uh
Interesting.
yeah.
So you're in
So
the process of being certified. How long of a process is that?
that is it's about a year long, and it's nice because we get to do case studies. I get to work with a PhD researcher who studied, she's phenomenal, Dr. Rosalba Courtney, in what she's done. And she's also been instrumental in sharing that breathing isn't just one technique, that it should be adaptable, it should be efficient, it should be supportive.
Yeah.
And so instead of looking at, is there one right way to breathe?
Yeah.
How do we keep our resilience higher?
Yes.
Instead of living in this too much of a comfortable state that
Yes.
we're not optimizing our bodies.
Yes. Yeah. It's all about optimization. I can see how that can be an important factor. I like the fact that when you talked about, you're training these Ironmen, like to get from one state to another, like when you're training them, are you doing it every day consistently, or does it have to be over a course of time, or how does it work?
I do highly customizable programs.
Okay.
It's very one-on-one. I encourage one-on-one the most.
Okay.
Because we're all
Yeah.
like a different snowflake. We all
Sure.
have unique fingerprints.
Yeah.
We are unique. So to get the best benefits from breathing, it's best to work one-on-one. I have all sorts of assessments and ways of determining where you're at, so I can help meet you where you're at.
Right. Okay.
If people are pushed too far out of their zone of adaptability with breathing, it can create too much resistance that they actually repel from it.
Yeah, makes
So
sense.
it's not, and it's so funny. Like, breathing is so unique, and especially freediving, in that you're finding the fine line of tightrope between pushing yourself and being gentle with yourself and being in tune with your body. And there's so many Ironman and high performance athletes that were my most challenging freediving students, because they would, there's this mentality of pushing past. And it's like, what if you could achieve better results by actually pulling back in certain ways?
Yes, that's right. But it's a mindset and a mind shift, right? So you're doing these, it sounds a lot like what I do with OCD and anxiety and depression clients, is you make a custom tailor-made, I don't want to say that's what you do, but it sounds similar, that you do custom tailor. It's no cookie cutter where everyone's doing the same thing at the same intervals. You make it target much to where their needs are, meet them where they're at, as you said. And because your people are coming from different walks of life and different professional backgrounds, you're going to do it in a certain way that's going to, it's for a win-win situation. But yeah, very interesting. Interesting. So do you have clients that stay with you for, I guess the other question I was interested in, that are 6-month intervals, a year? Is it something that you've got to continuously connect with?
Yes. And that's the biggest thing I learned in my own training. Was I was doing an hour to an hour and a half of breathwork training and doing yoga and stretches and conscious about my health. I did HIIT training. I was doing all of these trainings. And then I realized how I was breathing the rest of my day working on my business was not it was work. What I was doing was work. All the work and training I was doing helped me to a point, but then I plateaued.
Yeah.
And so when I realized that breathing needs to be checked in with throughout the day, because you are just going to hit a solid flat.
Yeah.
if you don't start incorporating it in with the rest of your day. And a lot of people see this if they snore.
Yeah.
This is how your breathing patterns during the day affects your sleeping at night.
Interesting. And that makes me think about Jackie, people living with sleep apnea, and they wear CPAP machines. That machine is acting in a way of the breathing device because the airway is closing up. So how that must vary too, as someone who has sleep apnea, a mouth breather versus a nose breather. Asthma, yeah.
A lot of the studies of the programs that I've been a student of. They were first designed for asthmatics.
Okay. So what are some of the research, if you've done anything on anxiety and breathing? Can you talk a little bit about that? Because a lot of the clients that I have, anybody who has OCD has anxiety.
Yeah.
Everybody with depression that I work with has anxiety, but not everyone with depression has OCD. So, or not everyone with anxiety has OCD, but anxiety is a common thread in all three.
And then you throw in ADHD and that
Yes,
has
yeah, exactly. So that's interesting. So when you work with people, tell us a little bit about that. Do you target the anxiety piece? Like you do a lot of thorough assessments, and I like doing a really good assessment, like a good snapshot of the overview. I actually have it's interesting because if I'll just share this with us right now, it just made me think of it. I call it the hourglass. But when I was at our mastermind, I didn't do much shopping. I only bought this because I wanted to find an hourglass. And I'm a very visual learner. When I'm teaching the students, my clients, I often have like different visual aids. Like this is a magnetic thing, magnetic pen. So when someone is suffering from anxiety, because we're talking about that right now, it's the thoughts, it's the emotions that we have to deal with, not so much the theme, but even though the theme people put a lot of value on. So here's your thought that creates anxiety. So it's like a thought action fusion. And so those magnetic forces, when they come together, are so powerful. So what I teach people is to be able to separate and make the gap long enough that these two magnetic forces are nowhere near each other and they'll never come back together. So in your way, yeah, so I feel like a lot of what you're doing too is similar, but the hourglass is we take the hourglass and it's very wide to begin with. So it's sort of getting all the, assessments, and then the hourglass narrows down so we can fine tune what we need and then be able to spread it out to the rest of our life. So this part of the hourglass is very essential to learn the techniques and skills necessary to hold your breath or to be able to overcome panic attacks, whatever it might be. So I like this illustration. So when you're working with people with anxiety, what are some of the broader things to get to the narrow piece that you do with them? Do you mind answering that?
No, not at all. So what's interesting is your approach starts, I guess what I would say, top down.
Yes.
And mine is almost like a bottom up approach where I have people start with their bodies.
Okay.
And feel their bodies. A good exercise is if you're in traffic, or if you just think of something right now that makes you a little bit on edge, or a stressful situation, if you will. And then next time you're in that situation, really check into your body and see where you're holding tension.
Okay.
And then just inhale and exhale out. Try and extend your exhale out that tension.
Okay.
And if you even need to put like a light hand on it, like a light hand on my shoulder, and just
yeah. Or even here, a lot of times it's here, right? It's in the neck and shoulders.
Yeah.
We carry a lot of our stress. Sorry to interrupt.
Absolutely. No. And so if you can just inhale, and then depending on the tension level, this is where I'm developing scales, because anxiety levels can change what breathing technique that I perform on myself. So a lot of my experience with my breathing techniques too, that I also incorporate, have been tested on myself, and how do I need to check in my body. So if you just put a light hand, if it's your shoulders, and just inhale, close your eyes and like shake it out. And then for a lot of people, it's pursed lip breathing. But yeah, just use your lips to do a nice controlled exhale. Sometimes I'll use my tongue just to like really extend it and not.
I like
but
that.
That again depends on what level of anxiety when I'm more anxious, I tend to have to off gas, like just
Okay.
Really like heavy exhales to kind of counter that state.
Balance. Okay.
But yeah, checking in when you're in those stressful situations. And
Okay.
then, and this is where it gets really personal. So even give space to yourself not to do the technique I'm saying, but to even just check in with your own body and say, what do I need
Mm-hmm.
to just help release this? And
Mm-hmm.
often your body knows what you need. It's just, if you ignore your body, it's going to start screaming. If you
Yeah.
can't hear the subtleties in your body, it's going to start to
Yeah.
scream.
Right.
So when it's screaming, it's about acknowledging and
Mm-hmm.
breathing and being with those muscles. And then maybe you can introduce thought awareness.
Okay. Yeah.
That
Good.
that's just the way I work. You can
Yeah.
work both ways, but
Sure. No, I appreciate that. I wanted to, because it's so interesting, I wanted to get to a point in our conversation where we could practice an example of that to just share with the audience so they kind of have an idea. And I really like that idea too, not only, but also because when you touch, it's almost like a grounding exercise, isn't it? Like you're grounding yourself, you're being mindful. So we talk about mindfulness as another coping technique and grounding as a technique. And when you're touching wherever it is that you're feeling, maybe your heart, often people will say it's like a heart. And a lot of times the anxiety mirrors heart attacks or panic attacks, right? So we
yeah,
always, I mean, the symptoms can come across very similar.
I even
You want,
have one like that. And I love what you just said. I just got so inspired. Using your hands is nice because it helps bring more awareness,
yes,
including another sensory
yes,
component to breathing helps people to become aware of their breathing
yes,
versus this
yeah,
thing you can't see.
yeah.
And when people are feeling here, there's a lot of energy up here.
Mm-hmm.
So exhaling, and what I do is I envision that inside there's a waterfall and
Ah,
everything's just falling to the
mm-hmm.
ground.
Okay.
And I'll even take my hands and put them on my stomach
Mhm.
and just really settle down in my stomach, because there's so much depth to the gut instinct.
Mm-hmm.
When you
Oh,
have a gut feeling,
yes.
uh it's a guidance. So kind of taking myself out of my heart sometimes and then trying
Okay.
to be like, what's my gut feeling about
Yes.
this? And
Yeah.
dropping like a waterfall, like just having everything.
Yes.
It just is
Nice.
this nice state of
Yes,
relaxation.
yes. And I like that. Any visual aids are good. Like I'm a visual learner. Not everyone, there's different forms of learning, right? So you try to adapt the best way the person's going to identify with. But I'm a very visual person. So if you can see that, that's very calming. But I think too, if I can just add the part about we get emotionally attached and hijacked with the feelings, our body sensations. But as you referred to before, the parasympathetic, and the sympathetic, that fight and flight system fighting against each other. So if we can just acknowledge it without feeling we have to flee it or run from it. I like that. Like when you start, actually grounding yourself, putting your hands where you're feeling it most in the
Mm-hmm.
body, because we want to get away. And I always remember Lucinda Bassett, a girl, when I got diagnosed, even before I got diagnosed with my OCD, I was taking some training on anxiety disorders. And she said, there's no way around fear, but through fear, you have to
Mm-hmm.
deal with the fear. And our anxiety comes across often as fearful responses, our emotion, our physical body. So thank you for that. That's really
Yeah,
good. It must be really, liberating for you to know that you've got all these different techniques and you can work with people based on what their needs are, eh? I like that.
absolutely.
Yeah, and you've done it yourself, so you're the expert at it. So that kind of brings me to asking you, what is it you're working on now? I'd like to ask you what you're working on now.
Yeah.
and where people can learn a little bit more. But before I do that, is there anything else you wanted to share with the audience that I didn't ask you, or that you think is important if someone's interested in getting started?
Yeah, just be really open to exploring these situations where you feel less comfortable, and just
Okay.
tune into your body and tune into your breath in that moment. And just doing that alone can have a huge positive impact in your life.
Okay.
And it's just like you said, facing it. Journaling is
Journaling.
amazing. Yes.
I assumed you do tell them to do that, because boy, there'd be a lot of stuff coming through on a journal, right? That people
Yeah.
didn't even realize they're doing. That would be.
And that comes more to the breathing experiences I run. I do 2-hour breathing experiences where you're utilizing your breath to kind of release more of your conscious thinking and tap into a more unconscious, or I almost want to say, this is not scientific, but like a state of release.
Okay.
You just access your body at a higher level through these. It's more hyperventilation type conscious breathing. It's got many different labels, but
Okay.
it's a interesting experience that can actually trigger the psilocybin area. If Have you heard of psilocybin?
No, I don't know what that is.
So it's like a spiritual so it comes from magic mushrooms,
Okay.
psilocybin, and they've actually done some studies in it helping with OCD.
Wow, interesting.
However, you can access that same area of your brain without taking anything at all.
Oh,
It's
wow.
purely through your breathing.
Interesting. Yeah. So that leads me to then to ask, I would like you to share with myself and the audience what it is you're working on now, what type of programs people can connect with you on.
Yeah.
And do you have anything else in the making? I know that you're working on a book, so share with us what you're doing now.
Sure. I'm doing the 2-hour experiential workshops, which I encourage anyone who's anxious. It's more a trauma release type experience, all the way to the one-on-one working with increasing the performance of high performance athletes and allowing them a little more space so that they can increase they can decrease their time with less effort.
Yes.
And then I'm
Okay.
also working on a book that's coming out. Really excited for that.
Nice. What is the book title, and what's in the book?
I haven't decided on a title. It started as a quote book because all of
Okay.
these cultures and religions across the world have breathing as a foundation. So I started to grasp, even in the Bible, it talks about breath and how important it is.
Oh,
Breath
neat.
through the nostrils, even.
Oh, well, that's interesting. And don't worry if you don't have a title, it will come to you.
It
I
will
know
come to me.
even mine, I ended up putting a biblical, adding to my second book. It's called 6 Secrets to the Deliverance from OCD. And I like that because deliverance was the spiritual piece. So, excuse me, you'll find as you write it and it all comes together as you're going along, you'll come up with a title. That was my hardest thing of the whole book, was the title. So don't feel pressured. That's
Thank you.
And so where could people reach you? What's the best way?
Breakthroughbreathing.com.
Breakthroughbreathing.com. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's excellent. So people can follow that website. Is there an email? Oh, that's the website. Do you also have an email that you share, or just the website?
Yeah. Jackie.troller, JACKIE.TROLLER @gmail.com.
Perfect. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to ask you, Jackie, is if there was a billboard in Honolulu, which there probably is lots of them. I've never been, but it's a beautiful, I've seen pictures. It's beautiful. And you're driving down the freeway and you see this billboard and it's your billboard and you are the one responsible to put a sign out there, a message to convey to the world. What would that message be by Jackie Troller?
It would say, don't just breathe.
I like it. Don't just breathe.
There's
Awesome.
just so many depths to breathing, and I am just so excited to continue to share with everyone.
Aw, and you're so good at it. I appreciate your time and effort and everything that you shared with us today. I like that. So again, if anyone's interested, please reach out to Jackie. She would be more than happy to help you. And until next time, take care and I will meet you there. Talk to you later.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye, Jackie. I'm just going to hit recording.